5-minute horn means we are leaving in 5 minutes.
Oh, dang it. Departing Leadville. I'm not sure this will be cut or not. Random noise in the background. And hopefully no one's late today. Get out of here, servers. I don't know why you're here. Looking at the time. Tick tock, tick tock. The time depends on the clock. One, 2, 5, 8, 9, 10. 10 o'clock.
Here we go.
Well, once.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we have been given the all clear from the depot and are ready to head up the mountain. Is everybody ready for a train ride?
Yes! Let's finish this
I
document.
didn't hear much enthusiasm on that one, folks. I said, is everybody ready for a train ride?
Yeah!
A little better. Not every single road crossing
Sorry.
on today's train ride, folks, you will hear a sequence of horns being blown. On the way up, that sequence will be blown at the caboose, and on the way down at the locomotive. That sequence comes in at 2 long, 1 short, and 1 long. It is FRA regulation for us to blow that sequence of horn at every single road crossing, and this is to alert cars and pedestrians of the fact that we are a moving train and we do have the right of way. Now, coming up here on the downhill side of the train, ladies and gentlemen, we are first up going to pass by the old Colorado and Southern Freight Depot. The old freight depot was used in the 1880s and 1890s to keep track of and service the freight trains that were headed down towards Denver back in the day. Now, in the mid-20th century, right around 1950, that building was actually converted to a lumber mill. And she operated as a lumber mill all the way up until about 2015, I want to say, and then she was converted to her current use, which is a local events center hosting weddings and other parties. Just beyond the freight depot here on the downhill side, you will also see a tall 3-story brick building. That tall 3-story brick building is actually the original hospital building for Leadville. It was built all the way back in 1944 by the Sisters of Charity. It was used as Leadville's primary hospital until the new one was built in the 1950s. Now, right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're traveling through the east side of Leadville, Colorado, which back in the day was built primarily by Irish immigrants. Leadville, Colorado here was founded upon the mining industry. In fact, it would be the gold rush that first put this mountain valley on the map. It was all the way back in the winter of 1859 that miners had logs from nature of plaster gold in the sand and riverbeds of the Arkansas River Valley.
Yeah, I walk
And so in March of
all the
1868,
way
small
down
band of
here.
miners would travel up
Then
and test out
around
those
here I
they were led by
stop.
a man by the name of Abe Leeds. Now, legend has it that old Abe Leeds dug his gold pin into the riverbed, and when he pulled it out, he saw gold. And lots of it. He was very excited, and he let out a great shout, exclaiming, "I have all of California in this bin," as this was after the California Gold Rush. And shortly thereafter, miners would flock to the newly named California Gulch. California Gulch is where most of the mining took place in the Gold Rush days from 1860 to 1868. That mining camp there would be so successful that they decided to incorporate it and they named it Oro City. Oro being the Spanish word for gold. Now, the mining done in Oro City lasted for about 8 years, like I said, all the way up until 1868. The miners used to build sluice boxes, which sit on the riverbed, and lots did. But ultimately, in 1868, almost all of the gold miners had shut down this area. This was due to a very frustrating lack of sand that laid the riverbeds. This black sand would clog up the miners' sluice boxes, and it made it very difficult for them to properly handle gold. Ultimately, in 1868, almost all of the gold miners left this area. Now, that would not be the end of Leadville's origin story. As miners would return to this mountain valley back in the side of the train, we are going to pass by our rail yard and our roundhouse. Here at the rail yard, you all will get the chance to see some of our extra train cars, the different equipment you use to maintain our rail line, and you'll even get to see one of our other locomotives out in front of the shop today. Right now on the downhill side, we are passing by some of our lounge cars and most of our rail maintenance equipment here on the downhill side. Right now we are passing by a couple of ballast regulators, 2 tie cranes, and a tie tamper. Each of those pieces of equipment have a unique job of helping us rebuild or maintain the railroad track. Here on the Leadville Railroad, we do have our own track crew team. I'm actually a part of this track crew team. It's a group of about 8 to 10 guys. And we do all of our own work on our train tracks, our locomotives, train cars, whatever need works around. We work down here. The track crew team will be fixing it. And also coming up here on the downhill side, you will begin to see the roundhouse itself. That is the shop where our track crew team does most of our work on all of our equipment. And it is where we house our extra locomotives. Out in front of the shop there today, you can see a ballast car meant for pouring ballast on the rail line. And then you also see one of our 3 locomotives, engine 1918, also known as good old Tough and Ready. Tough and Ready, as well as the other locomotive, which is inside the shop today, known as engine 1714, are both original purchases for us for this rail line. We bought them both when we bought this rail back in 1987. Now we obviously have a third locomotive that is pushing us up the mountain right now, ladies and gentlemen. Engine 1889 is its name. We actually purchased that engine about 5 years ago now, September of 2020. Being a landlocked railroad, we actually sent that locomotive up here on a truck, which was quite a unique process. All 3 of our motors are GP9 diesel electric engines. They were all built in the mid to late 1950s by the Electro Motor Division of Federal Division. Each engine has a top running speed of 66 miles an hour, weighing about 1,750 horsepower, and each individual unit weighs approximately 120 tons. And at the end of the yard there, we just passed by what we call the North Yard. You can see all of our extra railroad ties just waiting to go into the railroad at that point. This spring, we've already replaced close to 1,300 ties in the rail line. Spring and fall are typically our railroad tie replacement season. As aforementioned, ladies and gentlemen, it would be back in 1874 that miners would actually return to this mountain valley. There were 2 men in particular who would come back to this region. These 2 men were educated with master's degrees in geology, and they actually had a hunch as to what the troublesome black sand that originally plagued the gold miners might be. They took a sample of that troublesome black sand to an assaying office, and it was discovered that that troublesome sand was in fact a mineral that is known as sericite. Sericite is the carbonate of lead, which is how Leadville did receive its name. And not only that, but it is also the base for silver ore. It's essentially how they knew that there was silver on the ground up here. Well, when this was discovered, miners would once again flock to this region, this time in the tens of thousands. After silver was discovered in the ground here, we would become one of the largest boom towns west of the Mississippi River. Back in our heading, Leadville was said to have had as many as 45,000 residents living within the city limits, compared to our 2,800 residents today, and as many as 80,000 residents in the upper part of the Arkansas Valley here. Leadville was very much your typical western mining town back in those days, full of miners and merchants, railroaders, ranchers, and all walks of life back in those times. It was very much a part of the Wild West, with many famous and infamous figures throughout history passing through or living in Leadville throughout different times of its life. Quick interruption to say that on the downhill side there, we're passing by some farm animals. We've got a few sheep, an alpaca, and a llama out there. Some locals. Well, a couple of farm animals here. His name is Matt Bouvet. Kind of fun to see them hanging out. Now, folks, Leadville was also it played a large role in the railroading industry in Colorado. The narrow gauge railroad was recently invented in the 1850s, and the new narrow gauge railroads were expanding their railroading empires to tap into the riches of the Rockies. Leadville played a large role in that, as we had over 7 different railroad companies coming to Leadville back in the day. This rail line that we are currently utilizing was a product of that narrow gauge rail line expansion, and I'll be telling you the history and the narrative of this rail line and how it came to be a little bit throughout our entire journey today. Now, right now, folks, we are traveling across one of the more level sections on today's train ride. Later in our journey, we will start to climb a grade of about 2.5%, and our average speed will be approximately 10 to 12 miles an hour. You might might think that is sort of a slow speed for a train to travel at, but we do think the perfect speed in photo taking and very possible wildlife viewing opportunities you will have from today's train. And as we do round the next curve here, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to enter into the power line tangent. Here on the power line tangent, you guys will get a great example of the two long, a short and a long that we blow at every single road crossing.
Oh, tickets. Wait, not yet.
Folks, we are across a stretch of tracks that is known as the power line tangent. The power line tangent is the longest straight stretch of track along our entire train ride today. And here across the tangent, you all may notice many large holes that are dug into the forest floor. These holes that you might see throughout our train ride today are known as prospect holes. Prospect holes back in the day were a method that miners would utilize to essentially survey the land. They would dig large holes in the ground to see if they could find any precious metals. If they found such a thing, they would take a sample of that dirt to the Atang office in Leadville. And the answer would determine the worth of that land. If so desired, the miner could purchase that land from the federal government as a mining claim. However, if not, he would typically leave the holes as they were, and they would move on. As the aforementioned, after silver was discovered in Leadville, folks, we became a very large boom town. Back in its heyday in 1879, Leadville, Colorado was home to 19 hotels, 44 lodging houses, 38 restaurants, 82 saloons, 6 livery houses and stables, 12 blacksmith shops, 7 smelters and production hers, 2 assaying offices, 28 churches, and of course the housing to accommodate the 45,000 residents that call the city of Leadville home. Back in those times, ladies and gentlemen, Leadville, Colorado was even considered to become the state capital. Leadville is actually older than the state of Colorado itself. We were founded in 1875, and Colorado would be ratified into the United States back in 1876. To become a state, we had to select one of our cities to utilize as our state capital. And so they took the 5 largest cities in the Colorado Territory, put them on a list, and took a vote. These cities included Denver, Central City, Golden, Temple Creek, and of course, the city of Leadville. Now, as we all know, Denver would win the title for state capital, as they do serve as the state capital here in Leadville today. However, Leadville missed out on being the state capital by just 2 votes. Now, down there in Denver, folks, they do think they're pretty cool, and they like to refer to themselves as the Mile High City. And up here in Leadville, we think that's just a little bit lame, and we refer to those Denver residents as lowlanders. We do like to gloat just a little bit, and we refer to ourselves as the 2 Mile High City, as Leadville's official elevation is 10,152 feet above sea level at our city center, with the east side of town getting as high as 10,600 feet above sea level. Leadville, ladies and gentlemen, is in fact the highest incorporated city in all of North America, Here in Leadville, we do boast the nation's highest post office, golf course, North America's highest airport, and right now you are riding North America's highest standard gauge adhesion railroad. Now on the downhill side of the train, ladies and gentlemen, about 20 feet off the side of the train tracks today, you will notice a small wire that kind of runs up in the trees and along the forest floor. That old wire that you see there on the downhill side is actually the original telegraph wire used for communication between Leadville and Climax Mine via Morse code. Now I will tell you folks that there are a remaining 10 telegraph poles on the downhill side today. And it's kind of a fun little scavenger hunt to see if we can find all 10 of our remaining telegraph poles. They look a little bit like an old power line.
Is this the
About half of
side?
these poles are still standing and the other half have been knocked down or are leaning over pretty significantly. So good luck in finding all 10. Now across the next half mile or so, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to start seeing a lot of aspen trees. The aspen tree is very easily identifiable. It's got white bark and black circular features on the tree trunks. These black circular features do look a little bit like eyeballs on the tree staring back at you. The black features are known as bolts. They're created when an aspen tree will drop off all the way to dead or its lower branches. They do so naturally as a defense against wildfires. The aspen tree is kind of one of Colorado's more iconic tree species, ladies and gentlemen. They are a high elevation tree, only thriving really above 7,000 feet above sea level, all the way up to about 12,000 feet. And these trees are actually a very unique organism, ladies and gentlemen. That is because these trees actually propagate by their root system. This means that a single aspen grove is entirely connected via its root system. That makes a single aspen grove a single living thing. Aspen groves can be some of the largest living organisms on the planet, and the largest aspen grove sits in Utah, taking up over 100 acres of land. Aspen groves can also be referred to as aspen clones. That is because as these trees propagate across the root system, they do so by cloning themselves. Now you all might see that F-16 flying over us right there, ladies and gentlemen. The Leadville area is kind of neat because, like I said, we do actually boast the nation's highest airport. And that being the case, the Air Force actually does quite a bit of their high altitude mountain training in this area. But it means you have 3 different F-16s flying. F-16s flying across this area.
Holy crap.
But anyway, back to the aspen trees here. We are actually coming into one of the largest aspen groves along our entire train ride today. This grove is entirely connected on both sides of the track here. And it is a single living organism. As I was saying, the aspen trees propagate across the root system by cloning themselves. Each and every aspen grove or aspen clone will have its own unique DNA. This DNA decides things for the trees, like when they grow their leaves in the spring, what shade of green they'll be in the summer, and whether or not they turn orange or yellow in the fall. The fall months for the aspen tree are perhaps the most iconic time of year, as they do turn into a very rich golden yellow up here. And being at these high elevations, we get a little bit of an earlier fall compared to most places. The peak of our fall color is usually that 3rd week of September. 2 more neat facts about the aspen tree, ladies and gentlemen. They produce a chemical in their bark that is known as salicylic acid. Salicylic acid is actually the primary ingredient in painkillers such as aspirin. Now what's cool about this is that biologists here in Colorado have actually observed cow elk eating the bark of an aspen tree just before giving birth to their newborn elk calves. Finally, these beautiful trees do produce a very fine white powder on their bark, and this white powder works as an effective sunscreen for human beings. It sits right around SPF 15. snow a lot of the time because there's plentiful sunshine on those shoots after the pine trees are cleared out. Avalanches are obviously very destructive forces of nature, ladies and gentlemen. They move downhill at speeds of up to 100 miles an hour, and as you can see, they clear out just about everything in their path. Avalanches are a very serious part of backcountry travel in the winter season. It does seem that we have several avalanche fatalities every single winter up here. And they are definitely something that we have to be cognizant of here in the Leadville area. Now, they are obviously a result of the snow loads that we do receive up here during the winter season. Being at these high elevations up here in Leadville, Colorado, winter is just a fact of life for us. In fact, we do like to tell our guests that we have about 9 months of winter and about 3 months of bad skiing. On average, the Leadville area receives approximately 250 inches of snow every single winter. And being at these high elevations, we truly do have about 9 months of winter up here. Our first snowfalls will usually take place in the month of October. Now, they'll actually happen earlier than that, but snow that sticks to the ground is in October. We will then see snow every single month after that, usually up until late May and occasionally into early June. Being up at these high altitudes, we actually have the chance of seeing snowfall 365 days out of the year. My best example of this would be about 5 years ago now. We came on the train tracks on the summer solstice, which was just a few days ago now. But on the first day of summer, we had a winter snowstorm that dropped over 8 foot of snow on the train tracks up here. And so on the first day of summer, we came up the train tracks in a winter wonderland. A little bit ironic, but that's just kind of how we roll here in Leadville. I've even seen the snow up here in the month of July. Just another day up here in the high Rockies of the Leadville area. Now, winter is obviously the dominant force of nature up here. And because of that, it plays a large role in the forest life and the wildlife that do call these mountainsides home. In fact, elevation plays such a large role in temperatures that you'll get different types of forests occurring at different elevations. Right now, we're traveling in a forest called the subalpine. The subalpine is the last forest type where you actually get tree growth. If you look on the larger mountains in Colorado, you will see that the trees stop growing at a certain elevation. That's due to timberline. I'll tell you a little bit more about timberline a little bit later in today's trainer. I'm going to get a better example of it. But right now, we are in the subalpine forest, which is composed of aspen trees, lodgepole pine trees, and mostly subalpine fir, Engelrich, or blue spruce trees. Now, the winters obviously do play a large role in the lives of the wildlife that calls Colorado home. And many of Colorado's beautiful wildlife species do have many different adaptations to help them deal with the harsh winter conditions. Now, speaking of wildlife, a lot of folks do ask me what different kinds of animals we are able to see here on this mountainside. And we actually do get the chance to see many of Colorado's beautiful big and small creatures. During the summertime, there are a lot of large game animals. Almost every single train ride, we have the chance of seeing mule deer. Now, for those of you who are from east of Colorado, you are not likely used to seeing mule deer. They are slightly larger than your white-tailed deer, and they are so named because they have extremely large ears. We do see mule deer pretty much every single train ride, so be sure to keep a sharp eye out, especially in the forests on the uphill side of the train, as we do have several resident mule deer that call this area home all summer long. Now, we do see some other large game animals, ladies and gentlemen. We have the chance of seeing black bears, elk, and moose. We see some smaller game animals such as pikas, marmots, squirrels, ground squirrels, pine martens, porcupines, weasels, and the occasional fox or coyote. And a few years back now, we actually did have a very rare sighting of a mountain lion right here from the train tracks. If you get the chance to see a lion in your lifetime, you should consider yourself very fortunate. These animals are extremely elusive, very good at hiding, and they have large territories of up to 300 square miles. Colorado is thought to have a very large mountain lion population, anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 of these big cats in the state. Because of that, they do say if you spend a lot of your time hiking in Colorado's backcountry, while you will not see the mountain lion has likely seen you. They are very curious animals and do like to know who is passing through their territory at any given time. Now, as I said, folks, we also have the chance of seeing black bears from the train. Typically, the best time of year to see a black bear is usually the month of August. We get a lot of wild raspberries that grow along the train tracks, and it does draw the bears to the area. Now, a lot of folks do seem to think that we have grizzly bears in Colorado, but we actually do not. Grizzly bears used to be here, but they were hunted to extinction back in the 20th century. The last official grizzly sighting in Colorado took place in 1975. I think a lot of people get confused because of the black bear is a little bit deceiving as these animals actually come in many different colors. There are blonde black bears in Colorado, brown black bears, and due to the genetics in Colorado, about 85% of our black bears are actually a cinnamon reddish colored base. Now from here, folks, when you look down there on the mountain Virgin County Valley floor beneath us, you will see a wetland ecosystem known as a riparian area. That ecosystem down there is the perfect habitat for the largest animal that we get to see from the train, which would be the moose. Now, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that I did see a moose down there just about 4 days ago now, so be sure to keep a sharp eye out as there are a couple of resident moose hanging out in the area here today. It was actually back in 2020 that we had our first ever moose sighting. Now, moose populations in Colorado have been growing rapidly, and since then we've seen a few moose, typically a couple of moose a month up here on the left over. Here in Colorado, we do have the smallest subspecies of moose, which is known as the Shiras moose. Do not let that fool you. However, these animals still stand about 6 feet tall at the shoulder, and they can weigh about 1,100 pounds on the top end of the scale. A little known fact about the moose, ladies and gentlemen, they are fantastic swimmers. Moose are capable of diving 25 feet, and they do so regularly to eat the creeks that grow on lake bottoms here in Colorado. Now, the moose is a rather unusual looking creature, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit awkward. And because of this, it has earned itself a few different nicknames here in the state of Colorado. The moose has been referred to as the pine camel. They are known as the bucket nose. And my favorite nickname for the moose would be the swamp donkey. Now, ladies and gentlemen, my personal favorite creature to see here from the train ride, well, that title would have to go to the Rocky Mountain elk. I simply think the elk are one of the most majestic creatures that Colorado has to offer. Usually the best time to get to see an elk from the train ride is in the spring or in the fall. We don't really see a lot of elk over the core of the summertime. Now, the reason for that is due to the migrational patterns of these animals. You see, elk are actually some of the most migratory creatures in the state of Colorado. Some elk are found recorded traveling well over 100 miles between their winter and their summer ranges. Now, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that I've done a lot of wildlife photography here in the state of Colorado, and I've actually firsthand observed the migratory nature of these creatures. To give you an example of this, I will tell you a story of a bull elk that I have been following for over 7 years now. Myself and a few friends do refer to this bull elk as the Nomad. I first found Nomad, like I said, about 7 years ago now on a riverbed right around 7,000 feet above sea level. We had a nice little evening photo shoot and we went our separate ways. I never really thought I would see that bull again, as he was the largest bull elk I had ever seen, and those large bulls are typically very elusive. But as fate would have it, about a week later, I was in an entirely separate mountain range, some 20 miles from where I was the week before. I spotted a large bull way up high on the side of the mountain, and I started hiking to that animal. When I made it to him, to my surprise, it was the very same bull that I had seen the day before. He had moved some 20 miles that week. Now, about a year later, I would find the Nomad yet again on the very same riverbed, right around 7,000 feet above sea level. I was thrilled to see the old bull at the peak of his life. He was very large that particular year. Now, it was too dark for photos that evening, and that bull was cruising through the area very quickly. Well, based upon the direction he was heading, and based upon what he did the year prior, I decided I was going to try that other mountain range in the morning. I drove out there and I started hiking to the peaks at about 3:30 that next morning. And to my surprise, just before the sun came up, the Nomad would greet me there the very next day. After having followed this bull for the past 7 years now, I can tell you that he makes this 23-mile migration every single year in just one night. On that journey, he climbs close to 5,000 feet in elevation gain. And typically this journey takes him about 8 hours or so. Now, over those past 7 years, I have taken the time to piece together the entire migration route, and I can faithfully tell you that I can follow him across his entire journey now. The Nomad is one of the largest bull elk that I have ever seen, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I was fortunate enough to score his shed antlers in 2021 and in 2022. In 2021, Nomad scored 409 inches on Boone and Crockett. Which, for those of you that do not know, is an extremely large bull elk, and that was not even his biggest year. Now, at this point in time, the Nomad is a very old bull. He's about 14 years old this year. He's definitely
like
the very
around here
end of his
when we
life.
saw it.
When I found him, he was at the peak of his life at about 7 years old. And folks, I was fortunate enough to see the Nomad